Joining me now, Andrew Weissmann is the former general counsel at the FBI and a senior member of special counsel Robert Mueller's team, and Lisa Rubin, her first time on our show, which I can hardly believe. She's a brilliant, genius lawyer. She's an MSNBC legal analyst. She's been working her tail off covering all of these trials. Lisa, so glad to have you here. Okay, Andrew, let me start with you. It's great. I'm so happy. Andrew, Trump laid bare his argument for immunity in pretty shocking terms last night. I just played the clip for everyone. He basically compared himself to a rogue cop. That's how I heard it. You said comments like those make it more important that the court issue a strong ruling against him. So talk us through that and what that might look like.
Sure. Well, I think that what Donald Trump is doing, since he's really not going to win in the courts here, is I think he's making the election a referendum on his legal woes. Whether it's the E. Jean Carroll case, which, Lisa's been covering, or the criminal trials. And he's doing everything he can to avoid a judgment from a jury in those cases, but instead is going directly to the voters to essentially say, help me out here. If you actually vote for me, all of this will go away. I think that the chances that the D.C. Circuit is going to say that he is immune, and the Supreme Court even taking the case, even if they do take the case, which is not at all clear, I also do not think that he is going to find 5 votes. In fact, there may not be any votes for his proposition.
That's giving people some hope who are watching this, Andrew, which is always important in these dark times. Lisa, I'm obviously here in New Hampshire, but Trump is reportedly planning to be back in New York tomorrow. You probably are going to be there, too. You were in the courtroom all last week. What can we expect if he's there? Will he testify? Will he get cold feet? What are you preparing for?
Jen, we have to prepare that he's going to come, if for no other reason than the sheer logistics of how disruptive his presence in any courthouse or courtroom has been. However, my expectation is that, like he has before, he is bluffing, that he will not come to testify tomorrow. That's in part because there's a very limited range of issues about which he could permissibly testify. This trial is just about damages. It's not about whether he sexually assaulted her. It's not about whether he defamed her or even continues to defame her with each passing day of the campaign. So ultimately, I predict he won't come. And indeed, our folks in New Hampshire have not seen any indicia that he's preparing to testify by taking the time, for example, for witness prep.
Well, that's interesting. We will see. We'll see. But it's an interesting thing to watch. So, Andrew, one of the reasons it's weirdly important for us to all focus or read Truth Social and pay attention to that is it's part of where Trump is showing how obsessed he is with talking about E. Jean Carroll. He basically can't stop talking about her. He tweeted or he posted about 40 times about her in one day a couple of weeks ago. How does the jury weigh a financial penalty that would actually get him to stop? Is there anything that would get him to stop? And what would it take? What kind of massive judgment? Would it be like the kind of massive judgment we saw them do against Rudy Giuliani last month?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the oddities that Lisa and I have experienced when you go to the courtroom is that the evidence is happening in real time. So you will have the jury being told about what Donald Trump said, hours ago, continuing to defame E. Jean Carroll. That, remember, is exactly what happened with Rudy Giuliani, where he, on the first day, went out and said defamatory things that then were played to the jury. And the E. Jean Carroll side is going to sum up to the jury saying that for punitive damages, you need to ask yourself, what is the amount of money that it will take to get him to stop, or to at least think twice before he does this? Second, with respect to compensatory damages, an expert was on the stand saying this is the amount of money it takes to repair her reputation. Well, if Donald Trump is going out and continuing to defame her day in and day out, that money also would would go up. So I think you're going to hear very strong arguments based on the continuing statements. But again, to the main point here is that Donald Trump is not playing for the courtroom. What he is saying is going to hurt him in the courtroom, but it is really saying, I want a judgment politically on this.
It's such a confusing thing at times to watch. Why important to talk about? Lisa, in the seconds we have left, what do you make of this question of what size judgment or how his outside actions and words could impact that question?
Well, you know, Jen, when you're considering punitive damages as a jury, it's entirely relevant to consider what it would take to stop a continuing harm. So when E. Jean Carroll's lawyers are writing to the court and saying, while we have been in court, he has made public statements, that is a deliberate attempt to give the jury permission to increase that punitive damages award. But I'll also point out to you and our viewers, they're not asking to insert his additional Truth Social posts, for example, because you could debate who's actually posting on Truth Social. Is it Donald Trump or one of his aides like Dan Scavino? What they are doing is saying you need to consider the words coming out of the horse's mouth at his post-trial press conferences. That, to me, is meaningful as well.
The horse has said a lot. Lisa Rubin and Andrew Weissmann, thank you both so much for joining me this afternoon.